Today I'm reacting to YouTubers' whiskey collection. So I'm Phil and I'm going to fill you in about whether their whiskey collections are actually good or not. Now just to note that these YouTubers are not actually whiskey YouTubers who are just big geeks with all this like ridiculous amounts of whiskies. they're they get in different niches and that sort of thing. But I thought it might be interesting to go through some of their collections that I've found on some of their videos and give you my take on if I like them or if I think they're kind of just a bit trash. Okay, first video, CaseyNeistat.
Instead I need
Great
to talk
studio.
about this studio.
Love it. There we go, that's what we want, that whiskey. Okay, so this basically just looks like a really good cocktail bar. It's a lot of great drinks, great selection for lots of people, so not just for whiskey geeks. So we've got a few whiskeys. We've got your classic Jack Daniels, just a good bourbon mixer, very cheap price, same with the Maker's Mark. Both of those I own. I use it for cocktails, old fashions. There's a few nicer whiskies on this end though. The Johnnie Walker Blue Label. You probably actually haven't heard me talk about Johnnie Walker much on this channel. There's a whole bunch of different colors and Blue Label is kind of more in that upper range, so it's a little bit more expensive. They say that 1 in every 10,000 casks that Diageo produce or whatever ends up in the Blue Label. So it's supposed to be the best of the best. The thing is that I find with Blue Label is it is very tame. It's bottled at 40% in New Zealand. Like, what do we buy it for? $217. It's pretty expensive for what it is. If you want a punchy whiskey and you pay all that money and you buy that, you'll be disappointed. So that's why I've kind of not bought these sort of bottles. They're not really super interesting to me. They're very kind of watered down and diluted. But let's say you want to buy a whiskey for someone who doesn't drink a lot of whiskey. Like I don't know how much Casey drinks and maybe this works. And you do have a decent budget. Instead of going for the Blue Label, something like the Glengoyne 18, this is fantastic. Pretty much everyone I know who doesn't drink whiskey have given this, they've just loved it. But if you do just want a nice whiskey for $200, you could buy an Aaron 10, you could buy a Glenlivet illicit still, and you could probably fit in a Deanston as well for the price of a Blue Label. And we can see down this side of his collection, the Lagavulin 16. This is a classic smoky whiskey. It's actually one of the whiskeys responsible for getting me into whiskey. When I was first getting into it, it was those smoky flavors that drew me in. That doesn't happen for everyone. Some people never really get round to those smoky flavors. You know, some people it's the sherried whiskeys that draw them in. So it depends on your palate. It's from the Isle of Islay, which is this island that's really well known for smoky whiskeys. I've actually got a Lagavulin 16 here. It's also aged slightly in some sherry casks. There's a little bit of kind of those sort of dried fruits that come through as well. But overall, it's mostly just a big smoke bomb. But the 16-year-old means that it mellows it down a little bit. So it's probably a little bit smoother than maybe the Big 10 or the Lafroig 10 in terms of like spirity, smoky hit. It's one of those whiskeys where the price has gone up a lot compared to other whiskeys. Like with inflation, especially in the last 2 years, it's becoming really, really expensive. And it's a bottle I always had on the shelf. But these days, I'm not sure if I'm going to be buying it anymore just because the value for money is not very good. So what would you buy then if you can't get the Lagavulin 16 anymore? Well, my kind of new Lagavulin 16, I would have to say, would be the Kilchoman Sinag, another whiskey from the Isle of Islay. Nice and smoky, but also aged in some sherry casks. And it's much, much better value for money. So on to our next YouTuber, and this one is Peter McKinnon.
All right, next up is a bottle of whiskey. Now this one's called Blanton's. You might recognize the name from a few videos ago while I was on the hunt for this. Newsflash, I found it. This would make a great gift.
I mean, it is a really cool looking bottle. In my last video, I actually called this the most overrated bourbon, and I think it is. So he struggled to find this in a shop. And is it really that good? The price is apparently going up in all sorts of places. We can't find this in New Zealand. Like, it used to come over, we do not see it anymore. So what do you get if you want a Blanton's, you want something that still tastes pretty good? Well, the one I would probably get, and it would probably be a lot cheaper than this, the Wild Turkey 101. This is just a great, nice, punchy bourbon. It is actually bottled at 50.5%. So I would recommend if you are new to whiskey adding some water to it, but it would go great in a cocktail too. It's one of those ones that can do both.
There's so many whiskeys. You go to a store and you're like, I don't even know if I like it yet. And I'll be honest, the few times I had it, I was like, nope. But
Yeah, it's true. I hated whiskey when I first tried it. It's definitely something you need to warm up to. It's like wine or coffee or that sort of thing. It's part of the reason I started this channel, to help you explore more. You know, when you go into a shop, that you will understand what you're looking at and that sort of thing. And you can buy great whiskeys that will match your palate.
Woodford Double Oaked. This was a really great whiskey for someone that was getting into it.
Yeah.
It wasn't too harsh. It wasn't too smoky and rubbery tasting where you're like, oh. It's a great kind of like starting whiskey.
Good price.
Say. A lot of people that have come over to the house that don't like whiskey at all, they try this and they're like, I would drink that.
That's the thing. When you have lots of whiskeys, even if you are a whiskey geek, I always have whiskeys in my collection that people, you know, who are coming around and they don't really want those sort of big cask strength kind of whiskeys straight away. You know, you've got to have a few of those kind of more lighter, easier, approachable whiskeys in your collection.
Best technique ever. Yeah. Have you tried this one?
I have a bottle at home,
Yeah.
but I have not yet opened it.
So this whiskey here is an Abil or Abhinav. It's one of those whiskeys that are known as a sherry bomb. So these are powerful. You know, like the Lagavulins, kind of the smoke side turned up to full. This type of whiskey is the sherry style turned up to full. So the reason for that is that it's aged solely in sherry casks. I've done a whole video on sherry and stuff. Talked about that if you want to watch it. Because it spends its whole life in a sherry cask, all the flavor from the sherry cask gets infused with the whiskey and it becomes very like sweet. You get those dried fruit notes, the spice notes, those kind of nutty notes. All those classic sherry flavors get imparted onto a whiskey. The other thing about it being a bomb is it's 61.2%, so I do recommend having this with the water. It'd be interesting for Peter, like I know he drinks some whiskey, maybe not heaps. I mean, he might find it challenging, not sure. It could like mount his nostrils.
And the aftertaste.
Oh, that's warming me right up. I can feel it just,
Yeah, there we go.
it's like just taking over the whole.
If you didn't want a shared whiskey that would just like burn all the way down, maybe a Bunnahabhain 12 is quite a good option. There's also the Aberlour 12 if you're new to whiskey, if you wanted to explore the sherry side of Scotch, but you wanted something super, super smooth. So today's video is brought to you by the Atlas Coffee Club. So like single malt coffee, I like exploring single origin coffee. So the Atlas Coffee Club is a subscription-based coffee club. And what's really cool is that it's all about discovery. So you can learn all about these different coffees from around the world. Some of them can actually be pretty hard to find. But with the Atlas Coffee Club is that it comes straight to your door. So like these three here, each country has its own unique profile. And what's really cool is they provide their own like tasting notes, a bunch of background information about the region, where it's from, what it's like. It's fantastic. And they also tailor it to you. So whether you want light beans or dark beans or French press or beans. So Atlas Coffee are offering viewers of this video 50% off and free shipping if you go to atlascoffeeclub.com/firstfill. Thanks again, Atlas Coffee Club, for sponsoring this video. Okay, so the next YouTuber is Joshua Weissman.
Sweet on the finish. I'm a big fan of this.
Now, next up, we're going to talk about Scotch.
Nice, look. Okay, what have we got? Edredor, and we've got a Dalmore. Love Edredor. It's got a really nice house style. It's one of the smallest distilleries in Scotland. They do a lot of like sherry cask whiskey. I think I've got one here. Speaking of sherry bombs that we talked about before, this one here is a sherry bomb, the Edredor, straight from the cask. I'm a big fan of Edredor, what they're doing.
Well, that's Scotch. But the way that it's made is mandated by law, so that's pretty cool.
So what he's saying is that Scotch, you can't call it Scotch unless it's made in Scotland. If I made some whiskey here in New Zealand, I can't call it Scotch because it's not from Scotland. Also, all Scotch has to be aged in oak casks for a minimum of 3 years.
So, the Dalmore. This is a 15-year aged Scotch. Very nice. It smells good.
Now, why is Dalmore in so many different videos? I see it in so many different bars. Like, why is it such a hyped up whiskey? I kind of feel like it's almost like fashion watches or something. It's just like the idea of it with the big stag on it looks cool, but a lot of whiskey geeks are not actually a fan of this distillery, and that's because they heavily color their whiskies. So this color here probably isn't actually the color from the cask, it's actually coloring they add after, and Dalmore do this a lot. The reason they do this is because often consumers who don't know too much about whiskey will go into a shop, they'll see the darker whiskey and they'll think, oh, that must mean it's much richer and that sort of thing. Not true. A lot of straw-colored whiskies, as I've said a lot before, are actually really complex and tasty. So you don't need colouring in it, and it kind of ruins it. Sometimes you like to assess the colour, and it kind of just kills the whole like fun of looking at the colour of a whiskey. I mean, Dalmore's not a bad whiskey. I would say the biggest thing is the price. Like, let's have a look. In New Zealand, $218. I just find the value for money for this is just outrageous. I don't know if they're just targeting like rich bankers and stuff or something. For the price of this, you could buy a great sherry cask Bunnahabhain 12. In fact, there's also the Tamdhu 15, which is a little bit more pricier, but still will probably be cheaper than this Dalmore 15. So that's what I'd say to go for if you wanted kind of a really nice, smooth sherry cask whiskey and didn't want to pay the price of a Dalmore. And now on to Joe Rogan.
Do you prefer this?
It's very good.
Have you ever had Buffalo Trace?
That's okay. Okay, Lagavulin better.
Okay.
So again, we've got the Lagavulin here. Great smoky scotch. But if Joe doesn't like smoky whiskey, like it's very divisive, smoky whiskeys. Either you love it or you hate it. So it'll be interesting to see what he thinks.
Woo, that tastes like smoke.
That's right. It's one of those.
Is it smoky? Is it a smoky whiskey?
It is. It's one of those peaty whiskies. It's really nice.
It's very smoky. Yeah, interesting.
Lovely.
Popular in restaurants. I know. That's why I know
Is
from
it?
selling it. Yeah.
I prefer the Buffalo Trace. It tastes a little better. It's weird though. It tastes like it's made with smoke.
Yeah.
Like somehow
It is made with smoke.
Is it peaty? Is that what you said?
That's the word that's
peat
often
bog?
used. Yeah, that's the word that's often used.
Peat, just to explain, it's basically dirt before it becomes oil, that kind of in-between stage, and it's called peat. There's heaps of it found in Scotland. The things with barley, when it starts to germinate, you need to heat it up to stop it in the process. But back in the day, they didn't have that kind of technology, so they used peat. They burned peat. And basically what the peat does, they burn it, the smoke goes up, and it fuses with the barley. You get these really smoky whiskies. Again, it's very divisive. You can see that Joe doesn't like it. He prefers the Buffalo Trace, which is a bourbon, be a little bit sweeter, those maple syrup, those brown sugar notes. Okay, last whiskey video.
Clothing you wear or the hairstyle you rock, your beverage of choice is telling a story about you. The way I see it, ladies drink wine, guys drink beer. But gentlemen, drink whiskey. Now whiskey is very similar to my...
Just drink it because you like it. You don't have to drink it for what it says about you. It's not the main reason I drink whiskey. I drink whiskey because I love the flavor, the actual intrinsic quality of the whiskey. I like exploring, I like diving deep. Like there's just so many intricacies to the whole whiskey thing. I like the people you meet through, you know, the whiskey tube world and that sort of thing. Not just because it makes you more manly.
On the rocks is another option where you can have your whiskey over ice. Rocks is a great option because the ice cubes will dilute the whiskey slightly and kind of cut out that burn.
Yeah, so basically cooling down a whiskey will make it more approachable. Imagine you got an Indian curry and you heat it up the following day. You couldn't smell it before, but after you put it in the microwave or the oven, suddenly the aromas all erupt, and that's what heat does. You're doing the opposite by adding ice. You're kind of closing off those flavors, which is why it's a bit easier to drink when you have a big ice cube in your glass. I still recommend one big ice cube, not lots of ice cubes. That's just the way I like to drink it. Dilutes slower, doesn't go all watery as fast.
If you want something inexpensive, it's not going to be very good. But the higher the quality or the longer that it is actually aged, the better the quality is going to be.
Whiskey, this is not true at all. A lot of young whiskies are actually fantastic. Also, it depends on the climate. Like in New Zealand, the cask breathes faster, same in India. Like comparing a 10-year-old Scotch to a 10-year-old maybe Australian whiskey, you can't actually compare them because the whole climate's completely different, just sort of apples and oranges kind of thing. I do find there's diminishing returns the older the age statement. He's kind of saying generically the older the better. It's not fully true. I do find kind of beyond that 18-year-old, and if the price is still going up, it's generally because it's more rare or because it costs the distillery more money to store those casks and also the angel share. Like I do think age does do something, and generally overall, if you gave me an older whiskey and a younger whiskey, I probably would go for the older whiskey, but not always. Great, if you know any other YouTubers you've seen with whiskey, leave a comment down below, and maybe I'll do another reaction video if you like this. And don't forget, you can get whiskey t-shirts from my whiskey store on Etsy in the link below. And above all, share and enjoy.